You know, I think it's time to talk about Total War. It's something that I haven't done in a while, and this is a franchise that I used to play constantly, especially on the main channel. It was the first game, Rome Total War I'm talking about, that actually got me into PC gaming in general. I remember loading up that title, the map blew me away, being able to form these large armies and go to war and zoom in and see each individual soldier fighting and to become this general and take over the land as Rome, and I loved that. And since then I fell in love with the series and been playing it constantly for, well, the last 20 years, and games have fallen off. I think it's pretty safe to say that, and I thought it was a good chance to actually look and see what's happened. Up here on my screen, as you can see, I've got up the Steam database for the last, I think the last 10 games, Total War games, and it's not a particularly pretty sight. We can see down at the bottom we've got Pharaoh, which is the most recent. You'd expect this to be the most played game on Steam right now in terms of the Total War franchise, but it's not even close. In fact, it is the lowest played Total War game by a long margin. Even games like Napoleon, which weren't exactly huge and still aren't huge but have a decent player base, and Empire, which wasn't very well received on launch but has managed to recover its player base, just didn't really get the same advertising that Total War Pharaoh did. But still, its peak doesn't even come close to any of the other peaks. The biggest game, of course, is Total War Warhammer 3 right now. That is still huge. The Warhammer franchise is still going incredibly well. But it's when we look at the way that the franchise has gone, that's where we really start to see issues. Looking at SteamDB for all the Total War games, we can see exactly where the franchise has gone downhill. Going from the very first one of Rome Total War in the Total War collection, and of course, still seeing that it has more players than Total War Pharaoh. What about another one that wasn't particularly liked? Well, I'm guessing Thrones of Britannia. Going back to it, oh look. And it seems to be a common thread that it is the Saga games. If we have a look at Thrones of Britannia, and of course if we bring back up Pharaoh, all of these are Saga games. Now, okay, you might be screaming, Pharaoh's not a Saga game. Yes, it is. It was always intended to be a Saga game until they realized they'd put too much money into it and they needed to recoup it, so they bumped up the price and called it a mainline Total War game. But Pharaoh, albeit, is a Sagas game. 376 players in game, Britannia 231, and Troy 167 games. 167 players, sorry, should I say. And they are all known to be the worst Total War games to date. The mainline Total War game, as far as most people know, stopped at Warhammer 3. And whilst that is still an incredibly popular game, I think people are tired of the fantasy. People really, really enjoy what they've done with Warhammer, but I think the reason most of the frustration is coming out of the Total War fanbase is because there just hasn't been a solid historical game for so long. They haven't bought something that's actually worth people's time and, more importantly, money. And I think they've got to do something about it. You see, Rome was fantastic. Medieval 2 was incredible. Even Shogun 2 was one of the better Total War games, and Attila and Rome 2 have done great jobs of staying in the limelight and still getting people playing. The first Rome was remastered a while ago, and whilst, you know, it wasn't quite exactly what everybody expected, it got a huge all-time peak just because of the legacy of Rome Total War. Still more players than any of the Saga games, though, which is kind of ironic. Actually, I think it's almost more players than all of the Saga games put together, which is insane to think about. So what do Creative Assembly need to do? What is their solution to this disaster? Because I think it is safe to say that their franchise is a disaster at this point. Whatever they choose to announce next, they have to be so careful with. And I think, because of the desperation of a company like Creative Assembly, after 3 or 4 misses in a row, they are going to be really thinking very carefully about what they've got to do next to keep people on board. And there's something that they could do with it. Remastering is a possibility. I think it couldn't save the franchise, but I think it could get people slowly back on board. And we've seen this happen before in a franchise like Age of Empires. When they released all their games, they were so beloved back in the early 2000s. Then more recently, in 2011, they released the HD edition of Age of Empires 2, and then they started releasing definitive editions. They were able to re-release 1, 2, and 3 all in crisp 4K, completely overhauled and completely redone. And it brought Age of Empires back into the limelight to the fact that they started bringing out new games like Age of Empires 4. Now, we do have Age of Mythology, I can't remember, is it Reimagined? I think that's the way that they're calling their next game, which I'm very excited for and I think could be a big positive for the franchise. But I think Creative Assembly need to look down a similar route. Don't get me wrong, I don't think they stop releasing new games. No. But Rome Total War Remastered showed that they do have the potential to make beautiful remasters of their old games. Medieval 2 definitely needs a remaster. What about even the more 2D ones like Shogun and Medieval 1? That would be an interesting look, putting them at a lower price of about $15, $20, and I still think people would pick them up. If they've got shiny graphics but with this old retro 2D look, I think that's always going to be a positive for the franchise. Then, after releasing one or two of them, that's when they release or announce their next big game. It's not going to be Total War. It's not going to be a Fifth Saga's game. What it's actually going to be is probably Medieval 3. I feel like it has to be. They know that's the game that everybody wants, and whilst they've been so reluctant to say anything on that topic, they have to go down some sort of drastic route. Whether it is Medieval 3, Rome 3, which seems a little bit less likely since Rome 2 is still quite a current game in the Total War franchise. It shouldn't be, but because of the recent disasters, it probably will be. Or even a Three Kingdoms sequel. Now, Three Kingdoms does have some controversy. It was very much orientated towards a Chinese market, which is fair enough, but I think a lot of people were kind of against the look into, well, this is the first time mythology and the historical Total War series is crossing over, and I think because of that reason, some people weren't quite as happy with it. Yeah, it does sit at a slightly lower rating on Steam, but it still has a very positive player base, and it was the most played Total War game, I think, at the time. So they could go down that route, or they go to a new era. But I think that's too much of a risk for Creative Assembly. They tried New Era with Pharaoh. It wasn't new enough. The scale just wasn't big enough for the time that they put into it. So they need to go back to something that's safe. They need one huge hit to bring the player base back before they can start experimenting with new time eras, because I know there's so much more they want to do. But it's got to be one of three games. It's got to be Rome 3, Medieval 3, or Shogun 3. And I think anything other than that is still going to be a risk for Creative Assembly. And I don't know if they can afford any more risks. Because granted, they tried something different. It didn't work, but they decided to die on that hill of difference. And I can drink soup through a straw into my ass and someone could call it different, but it's not necessarily the best way to drink soup. And what I'm saying is, just make Medieval 3.